We are back. I'm Chris Drew from Menace Sports. That's my guy Ron from Best Damn Media. It's a pretty big week in college football. Obviously, Ohio State just came off an ugly win over Wisconsin, but here we are. And through all these ugly games Ohio State has had, one thing has remained consistent the entire way through, and it has been the defense. And you know what they say, defense travels. So we're here another week, more Buckeye content for you on the Bleacher Report app. Before we get into it, Ron, what's going on?
Nothing much, man. Our Buckeyes were able to squeak out a win, and you know what I mean? We're on to the next week, trying to stay undefeated. We got the Fighting Great Giannas this weekend, but we're here to talk whether or not Ohio State's defense can carry this team to the college football playoff.
Yep, and that's the big question, and in large part because when you look around at the other teams around the country, if you look around at teams that have won the championship in previous years, I mean you're talking about like obviously Georgia back-to-back years, really good defense. I mean the staple of those Bama teams, really good defense. Those Clemson teams that won before their fall of grace, they were really really good in the trenches. I'm talking like guys 3-4, first rounders all on the defensive line. Every team that's won it, including. You want to go way back with the Ohio State team in 2014, the great defensive line. I know the offense had Zeke and Michael Thomas, but, the great defense, guys like Eli Apple, who's a pro, Joey Bosa, who's a pro. I mean, they had dudes over there. Darren Lee was a top 10 pick. We've seen it, and the phrase is as old as football itself, it feels like. Defense wins championships, and that's the big thing. Can this defense win Ohio State a championship? If you take a look at the offense this year, this is why the defense matters. This season, Ron, the offense has only scored over 42 times.
And that's not traditional of a Ryan Day offense.
No, not at all. Because last year, they scored 40 on 7 of their first 8 games.
And that's why Buckeye fans have been up in arms lately, because they're not seeing the production out of this offense. And it seems like we've flipped roles. For the past few years, it seems like the Buckeye fans have been crying for a defense, hoping if we only just had a defense, we would be able to win a championship. And now we finally have that defense, and it seems like we're missing championship-level quarterback play.
Yep, and obviously we talked about that kind of at great length. And it's like, again, flip-flop. Like if we had your C.J. Stroud, we would be the odds-on favorite by a mile. If we had a Justin Fields, odd-on favorite by a mile. The thing that has cursed several of these Ryan Day teams has been the defense. And now that the defense is really not just good, I believe really, really good. The offense is a thing that everyone kind of sits back, watches, and cringes at. I mean, if you take a look at this year, Ohio State has only scored 40 or more one time against the Power 5 team.
Yeah, I think we were at the Notre Dame game, and even after the Notre Dame game, Kyle had still not thrown a touchdown pass against the Power 5 team. We see a lot of these empty stats being put up against not the greatest opponents, and it has to have you wondering in the back of your mind, when it really matters, the college football playoff or in the game, will Kyle be able to get it done? We've been able to squeak past Notre Dame, but as things get tighter, are we going to be able to score? And a lot of the optimism coming out of the Notre Dame game with the offensive struggles were, wow, if our defense is playing this great, they're just going to continue to get better. And as Michael Jordan would say, the ceiling's the roof when it comes to this offense. So you would think that they're going to get better. But we asked during the post game, did we watch Kyle McCord play his worst game of the season in week 9? So now I'm starting to hesitate about believing that this offense is going to reach that ceiling that we believe that it has, because we're 3/4 of the way through the season and we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and honestly, I think we're going to have to see a stylistic change. I mean, again, like I said, only over 40 twice this year compared to 7 of the first 8 last year. Under 30 the last 2 weeks. We're waiting for the Kyle McCord progression. We hear Ryan Day say things like he's on pace with our other first-round quarterbacks. That clearly is not the case. You and I both have eyes. We see that. And at least Kyle McCord knows, because he went on record saying, like, I need to be better for this offense to be better, because right now you've got a Lamborghini car that is the Ohio State offense that keeps hitting the curb with Kyle McCord. I mean, we're getting from point A to point B. We're not crashing it yet, but it's definitely got some marks on the curb. We're hitting the curb. It's really as simple as that.
Our rims are definitely getting scraped on the curb every time we go to park on Saturday.
100% the case. All these things considered, Ohio State, Ron, is still 8-0. And this feels like one of the old Georgia teams, one of the old Bama teams. I mean, last week, while it was the worst game for the quarterback, you know who was the best game for? Travion Henderson in the run game. What do they say? Run game and good defenses get you there. Do you think this team's identity shift could end up becoming we're a run-first team with a really dominant defense, and that's going to be their path to the playoffs?
It seems like that's going to have to be their path to victory because we tried to air it out early in the game and we turned the ball over 3 times. We talk about the importance of, with this great defense, protecting the ball, and it seems like this team is going to have to run the ball if they want to protect it. I think keeping our defense rested and being able to have these long sustained drives is going to be imperative for these Buckeyes to be able to continue to play like this and ride the momentum of this defense.
Yeah. Want to talk about kind of the other defenses in the past, while we unpack what they've been able to do so far this year. For starters, they haven't given up a 40-yard play all year this season. I think that is wildly impressive. The only team that can say that is Ohio State.
And it's crazy because I thought we were going to see it. We saw Cam Martinez get beat, and I think he is responsible for 2 of the longest plays. The third down that we saw on Saturday, and I believe it was Western Kentucky that also got beat on a third down. I believe it was a 3rd and 1, and he got beat on a slot fade for a deep pass. I think those 2 plays and then the 2 chunk runs in Penn State's 1 sustained drive that they had against us were the biggest plays that we saw all year. And it felt like, we had to have had more than 2 plays over 40 yards against Michigan last year.
Game? It was like 2 a game.
And it seemed like that. And that was Jim Knowles' philosophy coming in. We're going to give up a few explosive plays a game. And Ryan Day corrected that. Jim Knowles corrected that. And they said that's unacceptable this year, especially with the quarterback play that we've seen. It seemed like there was a focus and an emphasis on getting this defense right. And they understood the change in philosophy needed as far as limiting the big play, because we don't have CJ Stroud, who's balling out in the NFL right now, to fall back on and know that he's going to be able to hang 40 on anyone.
And, it's crazy because I want to give Jim Knowles all the flowers in the world again, because a lot of times, Ron, when coaches get a little bit older, you see kind of what you see is what you get. I thought Jim Knowles was coming to Ohio State as basically a finished product. When he got here, he was 57 years old. So a lot of times coaches, at least at that age, they get quote unquote stuck in their ways. And that's when you see the game pass guys up. I mean, we're watching right now the game pass up Dabo Swinney, who I'm pretty sure is younger than Jim Knowles. I mean, we've seen the game pass up coaches like Jimbo Fisher. So for him to be a DC and go through the dramatic changes of offensive football and him still grow is really impressive. I mean, you look at it, he was a full-time defensive coach in 1997. Guess what? In 1997, they weren't dealing with all this 4-wide spread offense, power air raid stuff. You weren't dealing with Phil Longos back in 1997. And so I thought the version of Jim Knowles that we got was going to be it. We have watched him pivot on a dime, change up the entire way this team is built, the entire way this defense attacks, and he's done it, honestly, the perfect year. Because if he would have waited 1 more year for this shift to happen, guess what? We're a 2-loss team today, Ron.
If not worse. I mean, the saying, can't teach an old dog new tricks. And when we hired Jim Knowles, everyone's like, this is the last stop. He is the head coach of the defense. He's not going to leave this job to go be a head coach somewhere else. This is his destination job. He is going to leave a legacy as a coordinator at the Ohio State. And after year 1, everyone's looking around like something's going to change or your legacy is going to be finishing somewhere else. Like if this defense doesn't get better. And he absolutely changes. The defense looked significantly better. And it's not just an upgrade in talent. You see a change in philosophy. When's the last time you've heard the phrase Jack or Leo? I haven't heard it at all this year. So for him to completely abandon the position that made him famous, hats off to him. For him to be able to evaluate himself and understand that things need to change is definitely a big step for him.
I mean, our guy day one in the chat is right. If Jim stays for a while and we match him up with a big time quarterback at some point, Ron, we're talking about one of those special teams. It's like an eclipse. Like you need both those things to happen at the same time. When both those things happen, you'll get a special team. It really does feel like Jim has evolved and is getting better and is using the simulated pressures to really hurry guys. And the run game has been really, I mean, stopping the run game has been really big time. I'm wildly impressed because Jim Knowles is single-handedly so good. He is going to end the narrative that Ryan Day's soft by himself.
Absolutely. And a lot of people talk about the tackling at Ohio State and the fact that we don't tackle in practice. Jim Knowles talks about he doesn't think it's necessary to tackle in practice. And a lot of fans are questioning that, especially after all of the explosive plays. We saw a ton of receivers running through arm tackles on screens, like extensions of the run game. It seemed like a lot of teams were comfortable getting it out on the edge last year and trying to make our secondary tackle. And this year we've seen such an improvement. I feel like I hardly ever look up and see the Buckeyes missing tackles. And it's like, oh man, how's he running through that arm tackle like that? And it wasn't a change of philosophy. We know they still don't hit in practice all like that. So for them to, Jim Knowles to be right, we don't have to hit in practice and risk injury to be able to tackle fundamentally. And you've seen an improvement in tackling from this Buckeyes defense this year.
Last year, Ron, the entire season, Ohio State allowed 10 or less points in 4 total games. This year, 8 games in, the number is already at 5, held at 10 or under.
And we've talked all season the magical number being 17. We talked about the preview coming into Wisconsin. I said, I don't think this is a trap game. I'm not worried. It's hard to really analyze this game. I see the record. They're top in the Big Ten West. But when I'm evaluating Ohio State potentially losing to a team, the first thing I'm thinking about is, can their offense put up enough points on our defense? Because our defense is so stout. I think they can hold any team to 17. And with the weapons around Kyle, the Travion Henderson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka, I just don't see a way that Ohio State's not able to scratch out 15, 20 points in a game. So just knowing that we have those weapons on offense, if our defense comes to play, I think they can beat anyone in the country.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State with this offense will accidentally stumble into 14 points a game, like accidentally, because that's how good those skill guys are. And there's home run hitters everywhere. Obviously, we know Marv is hitting home runs. Obviously, we know that. I mean, Travion Henderson, what he's been able to do. I mean, he's the guy that's become the security blanket and the home run hitter. I mean, that's been absolutely massive. And this defense hasn't allowed a single 20-point game all season. And against ranked teams are only averaging 13 points. So Trey is darn near good for 7 points a game himself. Marvin Harrison Jr. is good for at least 10 points. I mean, let me know if the math is math, and the minimum this team is going to score is 17 in a game.
Exactly. So with our magical number of 17, the worst we could do is send it to overtime, and then it's in the hands of our kicker, maybe.
Ooh. And we feel a way about Parker Fleming, so I'm not sure.
Hey, but we have been super critical of our special teams, but I do want to ask you this. How much do you think our punt coverage is playing into the defense's success? Because Jesse Mirko has been killing it this year. I think all 3 of his punts on Saturday were inside the 20. I think they might have all been inside the 10. And it just seems like every time we do have to punt, they're able to pin them deep. And he's been a huge asset for this defense and flipping the field. We know that Urban Meyer's big saying is, if you're not going to score, at least get two first downs so you can flip the field.
Yeah. No, he's been really good. I mean, he's been punting for longer than most of these kids have been playing football, right? He's like 26 years old. He came over from that punter school in Australia, one of the trade schools. I mean, he's doing a really good job, and it definitely, helps out the defense, because I know the defense hasn't been hyper aggressive. They're still blitzing and bringing simulated pressures, but making teams drive 80 plus yards against superior athletes is so difficult to do. And Tyleik Williams there in the middle, like, you are one negative play away from congratulations. The drive is derailed. And with that, I'm ready to talk about Tyleik Williams and the defensive line. Like, we're talking about a player who maybe is the best in the country at his position, and it's not getting talked about at all. Jordan Davis, 2021 Georgia defensive tackle. This is for our guy Terry at College Football Stop. Did a really great job. Through the entire season, 15 games, had 32 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 1 pass deflection.
And for context, Tyleik Williams has 1 more tackle, 3 more tackles for loss, the same amount of sacks, a touchdown, a fumble recovery, and 5 passes defended. So he's knocked down 5 passes.
And in 7 less games.
It's crazy. We're only 8 games in. Jordan Davis did that in 15 games, and he was the 13th overall pick in the draft. So we have a poll right here. Is Tyleik Williams? I just saw a mock draft before we started the show, and they still had Tyleik Williams as a second rounder. There's no way with the way he is playing right now that he ends up going in the second round. I have a poll. Is Tyleik Williams a first-round pick? And I will pitch it to you, Chris. Is Tyleik going to end up playing his way into the first round? And when are these mock drafts and NFL experts going to wake up and start watching some Buckeye football?
Well, we got to set an alarm, bro, because forget being a first-round pick. We're talking about a top 10 pick. Like, we're talking about a legit force on the inside. Playing less snaps and less games, 7 less games to be exact. Jalen Carter, who is absolutely tearing it up in the NFL right now through his entire 2022 season, which was also 15 games, had less tackles for loss, 1 more sack, less pass deflections, 1 more forced fumble, no touchdowns. I mean, and that was a guy that was it. So we're talking about Tyleik Williams at this point dominating guards at an absurd clip. He's the best player on the defense, in my opinion. And I think the defense has other first-rounders on it. He's the best defensive tackle in the Big Ten, and that's crazy because Johnny Newton was a guy that was an All-American last year and a guy that's going to be a first-round draft pick. I mean, he is the best DT in the country, and when you're looking at defensive lines, I mean, he should absolutely be an All-American, and there needs to be buzz around him because he is a large part on why this defense is back, and when he's out there, he has been disruptive the entire way, which is why I think, and you and I talk about it at great length, what team can score 17 points a game on this defense?
We've been talking about this for quite a few weeks. This has been our little thought experiment of how many teams in the country can actually put up the necessary points to beat the Buckeyes. And there's only 2 teams that I was able to come up with, and I don't think the Buckeyes even have a chance of seeing one of them. I have Florida State being the most likely opponent that the Buckeyes could run into that may be able to score enough points to beat them. And the second team is LSU. They're ranked 18 in the country. I don't think the Buckeyes are even going to have to worry about them. Outside of those 2 teams, I don't know if anyone in the country could hang more than 17 points on this defense. What about you?
I mean, I would say Washington, but they just had a 15-burger 2 weeks ago, and things have kind of figured them out. I do think they're a threat because they are so home run centric. And I think Rome Odunze is one of the top 3 receivers in the country. Not number 1, though. We know who that is, Mr. Marvin Harrison Jr. himself. LSU is the team that could put up a lot of points. The issue is they already have the 2 losses. So, you know, there's never been a college football playoff team that's had 2 losses. And we're about to be in the final. We are in the final year of this format. Oregon, maybe, but I don't think they would. Florida State's a tricky one because Florida State has the one thing that's really hard to coach, and it's the really big, long receivers that are also twitched up. I mean, Johnny Wilson is covered all the time, but he's 6'7". So how covered is he really? I mean, it's like a point guard trying to guard a small forward. I mean, he's legitimately the same size as Kelly Oubre, and you got Chris Paul on him.
It's like putting Steph Curry on Braun.
Yeah, it's literally Steph Curry on Braun, and I'd argue isn't Steph like 6'3"? So
yeah, Steph's bigger than all of our corners.
It is literally LeBron guarded by Chris Paul is what we're talking about. And he's not even the best receiver on the team. I mean, Keon Coleman is a monster, and Keon Coleman has the one thing that might be able to buy them a touchdown, and he is a return specialist at 6'4", being able to move in and out, and we know that special teams is good for 1 blunder a game at Ohio State. So you do worry about dangerous return men like that. Those are the only schools, though. I mean, no, everyone else is going to be a real dogfight, and this team is going to win and win ugly because of how good the defense is. Another reason I think the defense is absolutely back, bro, and I'm talking about like back to top 5, back to top 1, back to get in the backpack because I'm going to carry us to a championship. BIA, best in America. The secondary unit, Ron, talking about two guys who were first or second round corners out there really playing well.
And then Jordan Hancock in the slot, and then the
Playing
improvement
really
at
well.
safety. I just launched a poll. It says which position group has taken the biggest step forward this season: cornerback, safety, linebacker, or defensive line on this defense. And I feel like the change in the secondary has been huge. Everybody talks about year 2 in Jim Knowles' system is all about the secondary, and that's when you see them take the biggest jump. And we've absolutely seen it. Not only have we improved the talent by addition by subtraction, Tanner McAllister, Ronnie Hickman, Cameron Brown, all undrafted free agents, replaced by Jordan Hancock, a guy that we think is going to get drafted. Sonny Styles, a guy that's going to be a day 1 or 2 pick. David Igbinosun, who's been balling out. We've been without our top corner in Denzel Burke, and they weren't even able to exploit Igbinosun or Jermaine Matthews. So the step that we've seen and the depth that we had, you talk about depth in the cornerback room. Last year, we had more kickers than we had cornerbacks. We had kickers repping at corner in practice, and
Facts.
Not even just for the defense, but for the development of our younger receivers and everyone else. Having the depth to compete every day, 1 through 3 on the depth chart is awesome for the Buckeyes. And I think that's part of the step that they were able to take forward and why they've been able to weather the storm when it comes to these injuries that they've seen in the secondary. We see Lathan Ransom go down at the end of the game, and Sonny Styles, who's been playing all over the defense, steps right in at strong safety and plays admirably to end the game.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about a unit that feels like one of the classic. I'm talking like the 2016, maybe not 2016, but feels like one of the classic DB rooms at Ohio State. Like, I don't worry when someone goes down or we got a rotator for you got fresh legs, because Jermaine Matthews is a dude's sticky, fluid hips, played really well, freshman from Ohio. I mean, Igbinosun, his ability to come hit in the run game, massive. Jordan Hancock could play inside or outside, playing at a really, really high clip. And the thing that was missing last year on this defense, those dudes, while being far better than the guys that left, they bring a level of juice and swagger that we have not seen at Ohio State maybe since 2019, if I'm being honest.
Absolutely. And it's surprising because Tim Walton and Perry Eliano are cool dudes, but they're not like the swaggiest dudes. Like, they don't walk around.
It's not like your Fran Browns. It's not like your Kerry Combs. It's like, they're oh yeah, that's a really cool. That's my really cool uncle. You don't say.
Yeah, I was just about to say that's Unc over there. Like, they seem like a cool uncle, but they're not like, this is the coolest guy out here. And the fact that we still have that swag inside that room is awesome to see. That even if your coach isn't, Deion Sanders, that they still have that cornerback type of confidence.
Yeah. Wild. Last year, the thing that Jim Knowles had to come in and fix was the linebackers. They ended up being a strength of the defense. This year, they're the weakness. They're the thing that's getting picked on. Part of me thinks, maybe the scheme's a little bit different, but the other part of me is like, well, they're the weakness because everybody else took an enormous step in the right direction. Everybody else got so good that it's like, since we're not perfect here, where's the dip? And it's with the linebackers. But I'd argue the last 2 weeks, they're improving. And I'm on my Cody Simon apology tour. I'm sorry, Cody. You're a good player here at Ohio State, and he's kind of been the guy that's played a lot more. This linebacker room, if they're a weakness, I'm okay with it because I still think they're really serviceable and championship caliber.
Yeah, and if you're apologizing to people, I guess I'll get one out here too. My apologies to Steele Chambers. Forced fumble this past Saturday. I mean, he's heard all of the criticism. He's fought back from injury. We know he was banged up coming out of the Notre Dame game. Didn't miss a game. Seems to be back on track and balling. And I think Saturday was the first time that I did not notice him on the field and say, what is he doing?
Yeah. I mean, he played well against a team that, there's tape now out there against Steele Chambers. And the difficult thing is once you do start a slide as a defensive player, guess what happens? You get picked on by the bully. And so for him to be able to recover, and I feel like he is healthier. I know he was really dinged up, but for him to be able to recover the way he did and have a big week is important, especially against a team, a Phil Longo guy that takes a lot of concepts from the air raid. He's from the Mike Leach tree. They do a lot. Like, they'll spread you out and then run the ball 20 times. So for Steele to have a game like that was really, really important. The defense. Is this defense, with the way the offense currently stands, good enough to beat Michigan, make it to the college football playoff, and potentially win a championship?
I do. I think this is the best defense in the country, and I have that set up as a poll right now. Is Ohio State the best defense in the country? I believe they are, and this is the first. I couldn't tell you the last time. Even in 2019, I never thought, oh man, this defense is going to just win the game for us. Like, I feel like this is a Big Ten West type defense where we will grind this game out. We will drag this into the mud, and we will play tough defense from quarter to quarter. And the fact that they haven't been giving up these massive chunk plays, like through the first 6 weeks of the season, it felt like I was constantly living in fear of the defense being exposed. And I felt like we were waiting for that all last year because everyone was saying, oh, your defense has improved, but who have you played? You guys haven't been tested. The real test will be when you play Michigan, and we played Michigan, and they ran all over us. Explosive plays everywhere. But even then, we saw the signs and some of the deficiencies in the defense. I just don't see it this year. Like, you talked about the linebackers. We talked on a few shows ago about them being the only yellow flag on this defense, when last year they might have been the only green flag on the defense last year. They were the stars of the show. So for the best position group on our defense last year to become a weakness, but it'd still be the same people, not even a weakness, but I guess the least of the strengths. But to see them be able to get there has been great. And if that's going to be the biggest deficiency on the defense, I think you're talking about the best defense in the country.
I guess in doing this and doing the research for this show in particular, one of the things I looked for, Ron, was what is the formula to score on this defense? I think maybe it requires really good tight end play and some burners outside. But I'm not sure if anybody on Ohio State's schedule has that. When I look at Michigan, I think that Ohio State should be able to suffocate Michigan. And this year, we've seen some of the tough teams, the tough running teams. I mean, Estime, at the time we played them, led the nation in rushing. Like, that's how good he was. That's an offensive line that is better than the Michigan offensive line. And to see the way our defensive line held up against them was big. Did they wear down at times? Yes. Were they out there a lot? Yes. And at this point in the season, I always feel better if my head coach's expertise is a thing that they're struggling with. Like last year after the Maryland game, it's like, this defense is cooked. Like, they're not going to improve. Like, it's over. This is what we get, because we had seen it from Jim Knowles all year. With the offense, I know I'm not super high on Kyle McCord. I think that he is the weakest link on the entire roster. But I think that game plan-wise, Ohio State and Ryan Day can scheme up enough Marvin Harrison Jr. and enough Travion Henderson with the fun stuff to score 20, 25 points a game. And I'm not sure if anybody can beat an Ohio State team that scores 25. Now, dare I say, the Ryan Day bowl prep version is always good for 40. I don't think anybody in the country can remotely come close to scoring 40 points against Ohio State. So right now, I think this is a championship level defense. And I think they're so elite that, honestly, I would have them as the favorite right now to win the title.
You have the Buckeyes as the favorite to win the title right now because this defense is so elite.
That's how high on them. And honestly, before I keep chatting and say some ridiculous stuff, Ron, get us out of here.
Man, I appreciate you guys pulling up and joining us for the show today. If you want to find me, you can find me on Best Damn Media. Every day we do the Buckeye Roast at 8 a.m. We have the Buckeye BS, our flagship, every Sunday at 10 a.m. Chris Drew and I do the college football pregame show, the best place to spend your Saturday mornings every Saturday at 10 a.m. on the Best Damn Media YouTube channel. And if you want to find me on Twitter, I am at 2_TEES. Chris, where can they find you?
You can find me every day on the Menace to Sports show. Really excited. Every day live at noon, giving football analysis, not just for Ohio State, but for kind of all across the Big Ten. And find us on Bleacher Report. In the future, we're going to be reacting to some things given the college football playoff rankings that are coming out. So really excited about that. Thank you, Ron.
Absolutely. Go Bucks and OH.
IO.